So you might be in this situation where the task at hand is somewhat overwhelming. Oh, what's your name? Mark. I've got to mimic Mark. I look up to Mark so much as a leader. How can I possibly reach the lofty heights of Mark? That's not a winnable game, all right? And so you've got to say, what fires me up about this situation? What impact do I feel like I can have? That's where I think that drive and determination comes from. Define the game on your terms, not on Mark's, because he was this lofty leader before you, right? So create your own game and make it winnable. And then I think drive and determination and inspiration come from those things, right? And part of that is understanding what exactly are we trying to achieve here? How do I feel like my skill set can step into that place and create that winnable game we're talking about? So for me, if I was just doing the tradition of the program, I didn't like trying to mimic the other guys who did the thing better than I did. And so that's where the creativity and change came in, right? And not just for the sake of it, but in a way that was going to help us achieve our program goals. Does that make sense? And I guess I'd speak into, so now I mentioned all of my story so far has been Camp Tecumseh. And about 2 years ago, summers are hard at Camp Tecumseh. I mean, it's 7 days a week most of the time. 3 or 4 of those nights are till 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's go, go, go. And you have to make sacrifices from a family standpoint because you're just there. The only thing you do really is come home to sleep. But when you love it and you believe in it, you do it, right? And you have these conversations with your family. But about 2 years ago, and you come out of summers beat up, but then I would always bounce back a few weeks later. We can do this better, right? And about 2 years ago, I noticed that it was taking more of a toll on me, and it was weird because I never thought I'd leave Tecumseh. And I started trying to understand, why do I feel this way? Why am I having these feelings? And again, as a Christian, I feel like God's involved in that process. And so I felt like what we did at camp was transformational for a lot of reasons, for a lot of lives. And I felt like if there were more places in society, more people in society that had these kind of goals, that it would be a game changer. And what I feel like we did best at camp was meeting people where they're at, acceptance, right? And valuing people, and then getting them connected. And I felt like if you have value and you have connection in your life, that's a game changer. Would you agree? If you have people that are around you that care about you, support you, and want you to be successful in life in the same way that you want it for them, that's a game changer, I think. And in society, I feel like there are a lot of hurting, lonely people that need people to walk with them and help them through life. And so as I was examining why was my drive and my determination for camp not the same as it used to be, this is what I was realizing is this is needed in society. And that sparked a change for me to say, okay, maybe it's time for me to look out for something else. And that's when I got connected with the job at Habitat. There are about 50 kids every summer that go to Camp Tecumseh from Habitat families. And we had started, Habitat focuses on neighborhoods as well as just, I'll tell you more about Habitat, as well as just building houses. And so they asked us to come out, put on some one-day camps at schools in the area to try and love on these kids that are in neighborhoods that they're working in and teach them a few things about being good neighbors. And that's how I got connected with Habitat for Humanity, okay? It was hard to leave. I have my best friends at camp. I've lived at the camp for 20 years with my family, raised my family there. My daughter was devastated that we were leaving. And this was another one of those junction points where it's like, I don't know if we want to do this or not. We've got a good thing going here. But that was comfortable. It had become comfortable, and it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. And so you have another junction point where you say, I don't know if this is, it feels like the right thing, but it's tough, right? Are you going to walk through this door, or are you going to shrink back? As a leader, you got to walk through that door if you feel like it's the right thing to do, okay? And so we walked through that door, moved to town. We actually bought a house before I had the job, which is the wrong way around, I feel like. You should have a job before you buy a house, right? She's laughing at me. Right? But we felt like it was the right thing to do. And we joined Habitat for Humanity. A few things about Habitat that you may or may not. Everyone knows that Habitat builds houses, right? Who do they build houses for? Why do they build houses? Anybody? Yep. So we help people achieve home ownership that wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve home ownership. We're not giving houses away. The families we're building with, not for, because they're involved in the building process, we help them in that they have an affordable mortgage. Housing and housing costs, there is a crisis nationwide as far as affordability. And so Habitat steps in and works with families to help them achieve home ownership and create a stronger foundation to work from, a stable environment where I used the example of kids changing schools earlier, and then to become more self-reliant, all right? What we want to do is we want to walk with a family through the process, okay, to connect them and help them feel valued through the process, those two things I talked about earlier. So that they can have their own home and become more self-reliant and stable in the process. All right, so Habitat in this area has built over 300 homes in the greater Lafayette area. We serve 6 counties. And so that's a big part of what we do. We average about 10 houses a year. So that's 10 families that come through. And aside from that, as I mentioned, we do neighborhood work. And so they have a model called neighborhood revitalization. So instead of just building houses in kind of random locations around the city, they say, let's focus on a whole neighborhood. All right? And let's see what we can do to help it thrive. They don't come in and say, hey, guys, you need X, Y, and Z. You need, a community center, and you need shops, and you need this. All right? The process is we get together with residents and say, what do you want this neighborhood to look like? What are your hopes, dreams, concerns? And then what do you have to bring to the table to help make it happen? And we are a player at the table that helps try to make that happen. But what you notice instead of just building houses is you're building community together. All right? And so if you've been down to Wabash Avenue, there's a student hangout down there called Sacred Grounds. Anyone been? Coffee shop? I see a lot of students in there sometimes, but you got a lot of coffee shops on campus too. What happens because of neighborhood revitalization is you notice it's a way more holistic approach to community building. And so on Wabash Avenue, which is where our office is, and it's also a low-income neighborhood, a lot of work has been done there over the last 7 years to try and help this neighborhood thrive. If you know anybody from the area and you mention Wabash Avenue, they would say, I was told not to go down there when I was a kid. You stay away from that place. All right? But when you bring residents to the table and say, hey, what do you want this to look like? We're going to help. And what do you have to bring to the table? Good things happen. And so multiple partnerships have formed. Habitat's built over 30 houses in that neighborhood. They've repaired roofs, built sheds, all of those kind of things. And they needed a community space. So instead of us building a house, we built a community center where people can come and hang out together and do events. And if you live on the avenue, you get it for free. Okay? They are in a food desert area, which means there's no fresh produce within walking distance. And so we partner with Grow Local to have some urban sharing gardens, and residents in the area can come and harvest for free. So they have access to fresh vegetables. Churches are down there starting youth groups. There's a woodworking club for kids because there was no activities for kids. Timothy's Tools, they teach basic carpentry. All right? And so that's what we're about at Habitat for Humanity, is we think everyone deserves a decent place to live, and we're about giving a hand up, not a handout. And so that's what we're about. From a leadership standpoint, at Habitat, what I'm faced with now is they've been around for 35 years. The guy who started it 35 years ago just retired. No pressure, right? And I will tell you, I just want to be raw and honest with you, that transition is hard. Transition is hard. moving from one leader to another leader, a leader who's been there for a long time, staff, really looked up to him, has a great legacy. And so I get to step into that and say, okay, let's give this a shot, right? And so here, I think the biggest challenges I'm faced with as a leader now is having a group of people that were following a different leader buy into the vision that we create for Habitat. And so from a leadership principle standpoint, I've been there for a year, but I knew as soon as I stepped in that I can't bring my own agenda. Because as a good leader, I think good leaders build trust before they start trying to do things that they think are most important. So what does building trust look like for you guys? What kind of things build trust, would you say? Yeah. Genuine conversation, taking an interest in people. All right, good. Yep. What else? What else builds trust?
Reliability.
Following through on things, right? At this particular Habitat, they've had a turnover problem for a while. They've had staff come in, promise the world, and then leave or get told they have to leave. All right? And so I knew that this was a problem when I came in. All right? And so if I come in and start saying, "Yeah, you want to do this," and then don't follow through, trust goes down immediately. Right? That's a big one. Follow through on what you commit to. What else? Honesty. Yep. This has been a huge thing for me in the last, I would say, 5 years. And that is this idea of being candid with each other, right? You can use the word honest, but if you ask a whole group, like if I asked you, do you want to be honest? I don't think anyone in here would say, no, I don't want to be honest. But if I ask you, would you be candid with each other? That's slightly different. What's the difference between honesty and candidness? Is there a difference, or is it just the word? I don't think there's a difference, really. All right? And about here, this is where I learned to love difficult conversations. Not because I like to, create a mess, but I think that's where business happens, right? If you can get in this position where you have built a trusting relationship with people, then having these challenging conversations, constructive conversations, becomes the place where things can really get done. I learned on this journey when I was responsible for evaluating my peers, they know when you're BSing, right? Oh, well, yeah, you're doing really great over here, but they know it's coming. They know the Oreo method. Give them a praise. Tell them something they need to work on, but leave it with praise. People see through that stuff, all right? So how do you get to a place as a leader where you can have honest, candid conversations with people, right? Because if you don't, what happens? If you let those conversations slip, what happens? Nothing changes. So then what happens? Does it get better or does it get worse? Yeah, a lot of times it goes even further, right? Especially where frustrations are concerned. If you are like, I'll just let it go. No, you won't. It's going to come back up down the line somewhere. So how do you create a situation where you can have this conversation and still maintain relationship? Yeah, I had a very good friend at camp, and actually I work with him now, and just the nicest guy. His wife was very blunt, and she's very opinionated, and they both worked at camp together. And she had a position in a slightly different department, and she was letting her mouth go about some things, and it was affecting his position at camp. And the tendency is to say, oh, what can we do to kind of get around it? And I remember a very specific conversation that I had to have with both of them where I thought, oh, this is going to suck big time, right? But to go into that conversation and say, look, I love you both, but I have to let you know what's going on here. You're rubbing people the wrong way. And I'm telling you this because I love you, right? And I don't want this to continue. It's not that I'm calling you out on this situation. I'm letting you know these are the kind of comments that I'm hearing, all right? If I don't do that, it weighs on me, it weighs on me, it weighs on me. It affects how I can lead in the future. Whereas if you walk into it, what does the other side feel like when you come out of those conversations? I feel so much lighter, right? If you're able to have those conversations. So coming in to the Habitat environment, this is one of the things that I have been preaching from the beginning. Because when you talk about it with the people around you, but not to the person that it most affects in your relationship, only bad things happen. There's a quote by Ed Catmull from, he's the CEO of Pixar, and he wrote a book called Creativity Inc. And he said this quote that has stuck with me: if there's more conversation in the hall after the meeting than in the meeting, you've got a problem with your culture. And you may have sat in meetings where you've been asked for your opinion, or someone's been asked for their opinion, they don't say anything, but the moment they get outside, they start sharing all these things. We have to get to a place where we can have constructive conversation with each other. If you want a strong culture, you want to create a strong culture, as a leader, you need to promote these candid conversations. Does it happen overnight? No. This is something else that I'm experiencing now as a leader, is change takes time. Changing culture takes even longer. All right? And you can't say it once. I've heard, the director's position is the chief repetition officer. You got to keep going back there. All right? You can't just say it once and expect that that's going to happen. You have to keep going back there. I remember a leader at camp. We want to be the most friendly and most helpful place. When someone shows up, we want to be friendly and helpful. I don't know how many staff meetings it's like, all right, I get it. But it took that for it to really become ingrained. Okay? What other questions do you have where leadership's concerned? Have any other thoughts? What are you most interested in about leadership? Just looking at my notes here. Other questions? Yes?
I'm trying to pose this question correctly. So you talked about leadership being helping other people be successful. I find one of the hardest things for me when I'm in a leadership position is encouraging someone who doesn't show that they're trying on their own. And so I tend to let those people go and focus only on the people who are putting in effort. How do you deal with or encourage or bring people on board when they are part of your team but they're not showing that?
They're not applying themselves. Yeah, I think to me that goes back to this previous point about having candid conversations. So I'm most interested in that situation. Why not? Why are you not? Like, are you not enjoying it? Do you feel uncomfortable? Is there something there that's making it hard for you to do your best work, right? And in that process, I think what that does is it kind of filters down. I think in our heads, a lot of times we look at somebody who's not trying and you say, come on, man, what's your problem? Instead of asking them, what is the problem, right? Why are you, what's happening here that's not allowing you, again, to do your best work? Does that make sense? But it's having the, again, as a supervisor, employee, it's a little easier sometimes to have that conversation, but if it's peer-to-peer, like you guys are in a group situation and you notice somebody who's not giving the same effort that you're giving, anyone been in that situation before? I would imagine every hand in the room has experienced that before. How do you do that in a way, again, that maintains relationship? And for me, I really want if you want everyone to be successful, then what can you do in that situation? I think our tendency is to pluck up the courage, you're not doing your share, or you're not doing this. And I don't see that giving the relationship much chance. You know what I mean? So how do you do it in a way that not only maintains relationship, but promotes relationship? Hey, man, I've noticed that, it seems like you're struggling a little bit in class with, I don't know, whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Is there something going on? Is everything okay? I think starting with that, is everything okay, is much better than you're not really cutting it here. You know what I mean? So Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So, like, I'm sure working with like accountants, you need to work with like a lot of different people with different personalities. How did you work on like meeting with someone who sort of maybe not direct opposite from you personality, but you know how your personality kind of saw leadership differently?
That's a great question, because I think a lot of times what you think is the ideal is like, hey, it's like we're the same person. This is awesome. But in strong teams, there is a lot of diversity, and that includes personalities. And I will admit, there have been times in my career where people have rubbed me the wrong way, and some of it is just personality. And I noticed, I can think of times where I've maybe haven't given them the same shot as someone else who is easier to supervise or work with. I think by the time I left camp, the way we kind of approached that is we did some intentional training with the staff to say, he has like 6 or 7 different personalities, and we gave them all a name, and we gave them all a story, and we told their story to everybody, and we talked about how do you work with this person? How do you personally work with this person? Raise your hand if you struggle with this kind of personality, and given this space to just acknowledge that it is hard, right? Raise your hand if you gravitate to people like this, right? And so at camp, there's the frat guy was one of the people that we have a lot of folks that come from the fraternity sorority scene. The person who's like ultra athlete, and then we had the hipster, and so we categorized each of those, and again, not to say everyone fits into all of those categories, but it's close in a lot of ways to a lot of the personalities that came through camp. And so acknowledging, first of all, that different personalities exist, and then saying this is a healthy thing and trying to set it up that way. For me as a leader, I felt like that set the team up more for success, and as a leader, it reminded me, hey, this is a thing, and there are going to be people that you don't identify with quite as much. And I think identifying that allows you to keep yourself more accountable in that way. That answer your question? Anybody else? No? Okay. I think if you don't have any more questions, yes?
What's the best way to get involved with Habitat for Humanity?
That's a great question. So there are many different ways that volunteers are kind of the lifeblood of the organization to make things happen. And so you can sign up to come out, for a half day or a day. We like people to come for a whole day. You can get more accomplished. There's oftentimes a lot of training that's involved. If you're an individual, just get on the website and fill out the information form, and someone will get back with you on what that looks like. So there is build opportunities. You don't have to have experience, feel comfortable on a work site. We can train you on a lot of the things. I think there are other ways that we have other folks volunteer, as far as if we get a lot of student groups, organizations that want to come together. And so building, sometimes there's neighborhood work as far as cleanup or projects that we're doing. Sometimes groups provide meals for volunteers. We like to kind of eat around the same table, and so volunteer groups will bring the food in, and it's just a great way of, you work by each other and then you eat by each other, and it's a great way of building relationships. So those are kind of the main ways. We also have a chapter here on campus that is a Habitat for Humanity. I think it's one of the bigger dues-paying organizations on campus, student groups. So that's another way. They're always looking for folks to get involved that way, and there's great leadership opportunity with their positions as well. And so I'd highlight those as the most important ways, but you can get connected through the website. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I hope there was a few little tidbits that made you think. Again, everyone's story is different. Everyone's journey is different. So thank you.
Thank you.